A lot of times healing from narcissistic abuse, you're looking for a therapist. You're looking for someone that you can connect with that actually understands you, understands the situation, and a lot of times needs to understand narcissism so that they're not just running over the things that they need to run over and thinking, oh, you should be better now, when you're not. A lot of times finding a therapist from narcissistic abuse is extremely hard, extremely difficult. When I talk to people every single day, I find people that come to the table and they're like, I've been to a therapist and they haven't been able to give me any advice to actually heal. Like I've been with a person for, several years, or I've been with a therapist for a couple months and they're still not understanding. They're thinking I should just be over it. They're thinking I should move on. They've given me a couple mantras or things to say and it's not really changing anything. And a lot of times we find people that get really frustrated with this because you're not actually getting the healing that you need. You're not actually able to find the aspect of clarity of you getting free from the toxic person. And it was hard for us to find as well. It was hard for my wife and I as couples to be able to find one. It took us about 3 times to be able to find the right therapist for us. For myself personally, it took me about 4 times before I actually found the therapist for me. And then a lot of times there's this back and forth of when can I actually find one? How do I find one? All these pieces that make it confusing and make it hard. Now, side note, because I mentioned couples, if you're with a narcissist and there's let's go to therapy together, he needs to go to therapy on his own. Okay? Because the majority of time, when you go to a couples therapist or couples counseling with a narcissist, you're setting yourself up to get abused even more, to get gaslit, to get confused, and to oftentimes have the therapist completely manipulated, and you walk away being like, what was the point of that? So please be careful. You want to have a narcissist that actually is working on themselves before they're ever willing to work on you as a couple. Because the majority of the time they flip it around. I don't want to work on myself, let's just work on being a couple. And they get together as a couple, never work on themselves, I'm back to square one. Do you struggle to actually find a therapist that actually understands? I mentioned one that would be okay, well, you should just be over it by now. Moving past. Or maybe they're surprised. Man, it's been 2 years, I'm surprised you're still struggling. It's because oftentimes they don't get it. They don't understand the aspects of a trauma bond. They don't understand the aspects of Stockholm Syndrome, where it's the idea of you are stuck mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. You're I don't know how to get out. And they're well, it doesn't look that bad. And they don't understand. Not all therapists understand and know about narcissistic abuse. Unfortunately, a lot of them have it in their bios of I understand narcissism. I work with narcissistic abuse survivors. And then you start to talk with them and you're this isn't really helping me. A lot of times people I've seen learn it in school, but they've never actually seen it in the wild. They've never actually seen narcissism in real life. They've never experienced it, so they have no clue. Several times I've met with different therapists in my one-on-one coaching, and that's been almost exactly what they've alluded to, is the idea of I've read about this, I've heard about this, I've studied about this, but I never saw it. I never expected it to come this way. And the majority of them are I'm a therapist, I'm a counselor, I should have known better. Well, what's on paper and oftentimes what you actually see sometimes are 2 different things. Oftentimes, a therapist will be manipulated, whether that's going solo with another narcissist or in couples therapy. And sometimes it's oh, they don't catch it and they don't understand it because, well, he say he's trying to do right. He say he's trying to change and you're the one that looks crazy. And this is the hard thing when we talk about couples counseling or therapy, because you walk into the therapist's office with a brand new person each time. And all of a sudden you're sitting down and they're talking and you're just who's this? Because they've come in with a different mask. They've come in with a mask that says that they're a good person, when in reality what they demonstrate and what they show you on a day-to-day basis is completely the opposite. And a lot of times when that narcissist comes in, they're walking in with a mask to be able to manipulate the therapist, to be able to confuse you, and to dominate the situation. Well, when we're talking about therapy, how do we actually narrow down what's going to help you? There's many different types out there. I've worked with several different types of therapists. I've done several different types of therapy. My wife has done multiple as well. There's multiple different kinds out there. What I would say is get with someone who's actually going to get you the help that you need. Now, you can test out different types that I'll talk about here in a minute. But when you start to go, you want to start to see progress. You want to start to see some goal setting. You want to start to see some things of hey, this is progression. If it's just something that you come and you just kind of like dump each time, and then like they don't really give you any homework or things to do or practices to be able to implement or tools to be able to help you actually break out the trauma bond, then it's not really helpful. Like with that, you can vent to your journal, you can vent to a friend, but when it comes down to it, you need someone who's actually going to hear you, listen, and then help you move forward, give you the tools to actually succeed. So there's different types. Personally, I've done like several different aspects of EMDR. I've worked some with IFS model, CBT, DBT. There's plenty of different other ones. I've started to learn different tapping methods, Splunkna, etc. Like there's multiple things that you can get into to be able to say, okay, this is actually going to help me. And those are different proven practices that have helped a lot of people. The thing you have to understand is you have to find one that actually agrees and understands about narcissistic abuse. If you have one and they're like, hey, I understand it, but then you start talking to me like, I don't really feel like you understand it, that's an issue. That is a red flag when it comes to therapy. You need to find one that actually knows and understands what you're going through. You need to see one that has experience with dealing with narcissistic personality disorder. Like they need to actually have experience. Otherwise, if it's just textbook, a lot of times they're not going to be able to help you. Sometimes you need to ask, like, hey, can you, do you dive into family of origin dynamics? Do you dive into where this started? Do you dive into, like, where it started for me, of why I'm attracted to this person? Like, do you actually work on that? Do you actually work on establishing and going towards concrete goals? Is there something actually there? You're looking for a therapist that's going to validate, that's going to have compassion, that's going to have good boundaries, that's going to identify self-defeating patterns and help you move forward. Before I forget, I want to be able to mention, like, if you're struggling in this aspect, to give you another perspective, you can check out escapetoxicity.com. It's a course that we put together. It's a 7-day course just to help start breaking the ice so that you understand what narcissism is. So you actually put a better perspective and a picture on what it actually is, what's going on, how to set up boundaries, what your reactive abuse look like what this all means. Once you're able to see that and define that, you're able to actually like step away from it and be like, okay, I can actually heal from this. I can actually work on this. But the hard thing is when you don't feel like you're even heard. The hard thing is when you're with a therapist, you don't feel like you're even validated. So if you're in that situation today, you need to reach out for help. You need to find someone else. You need to go through a challenge, talk to a coach, whatever it might be, to find clarity and to find healing moving forward. When we're talking about this aspect of therapy and dealing with the therapist, I want to tell you a couple things to look out for. Look out for a therapist that gets impatient with you. I'm not just saying like impatient because you've said the same thing for, a year. I'm saying like impatient of like you're not healing faster, you're not getting over this, and they're not really phrasing it different or working with it different. They're just like, they're frustrated. Sometimes there's therapists that are very prideful. Like they're the best, or they're thinking a certain aspect and like you're not meeting that, you're not getting there. Sometimes dismissive, sometimes defensive, judgmental. A big one is sometimes jumping to conclusions where they're expecting a certain conclusion and you're like, no, that's not it. I wasn't even going in that direction. Sometimes they dismiss different things. They dismiss the aspect of going no contact. You might be with a therapist is like, it's not that big a deal. You don't have to go no contact. You can still interact with them. Yeah, that therapist is dangerous. Sometimes they won't give any feedback. And sometimes they'll be easily manipulated. So I say all that just to paint a picture, to give you an idea when we're talking about therapy and we're talking about dealing with a therapist, like you need to find one that's going to work for you, but you need to find one that's educated enough in all of this. And I'll give you 2 examples really quick. I had a client last year in 2022, that the year before she'd actually spent over $10,000 in different types of therapy trying to be able to figure out what was going on. Trying to be able to figure out what was actually happening, because the abuse that she was in was from a covert narcissist. It was subtle, it was passive aggressive, it was hard to be able to see. It was constantly belittling her and putting her down. We worked together for 3 months to be able to get her free. Radical transformation from the mindset. Because that's what was still stuck. The thought process of I'm not good enough. The thought process of like I can't do this. The thought process of like why does he get the next person? Why do they get a happy relationship? All these different things that plagued her for such a long period of time that she was not able to break free out of until we started working together and saying, hey, this is a trauma bond. Let's work through the triggers so that you actually break the hold that the trauma bond has over you and take back your power of who you actually are. And so we helped her from one stage to the next of going through the aspects of getting her healing. I was talking to a couple the other day, and they had spent the previous year about $12,000 on different types of therapy and couples counseling. They had gone to people that said they knew about narcissism, or people that said that they had degrees in different aspects of psychology focusing on narcissism or whatever aspect of it. They said they went to some people that claimed to be experts or claimed to be really good at dealing with aspects of narcissism. The difference is when they sat in my Zoom call and when I talked to them, I was calling out the behaviors right then and there. For one, it was just shock of like, I didn't know someone could catch this. And for the other person, they were like, wow, I'm actually seen, heard, and validated. And that's the difference. And that's why a lot of times I tell people don't go to couples counseling with a therapist, because a lot of times they're uneducated in what narcissism is and they don't see it. And then they also don't call it out. They especially don't call it out aggressively like I do. But a big piece is like, I want to make sure people actually understand this is real and it needs to stop. It needs to stop by a person deciding, hey, I'm going to be honest no matter what. Till the narcissist is honest about who they are, until you're honest about the pain that you have to walk through, nothing's going to change. So if you're searching today and you're not sure, what do I actually do? How do I find the right therapist? Definitely want to have you get connected to people that are going to help, that are going to give you the tools to move forward. You can go to escapetoxicity.com. Feel free to be able to check out the course that we have on there. If you want to reach out, if you want to talk to me, you can go to rawmotivation.com. We've got one-on-ones there. You can book a discovery call with one of our coaches because we want to be able to figure out how we can best partner with you to break free of that mindset. That mindset of shame and guilt, the fog that's holding you down, the things that are beating you down, you're not sure how to get out, you're not sure how to get free from a trauma bond. Please reach out for help.